if you're a visionary and you're not necessarily the greatest executor, that's not necessarily a showstopper. You got to figure out how to build that team of collaborators to help you move things forward.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lucas. I'm one of the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change.
And I'm Justin Scott Campbell. I am a DEI consultant and leadership executive coach.
This is our podcast, Catalyzing a Culture of Inclusion, where we highlight catalysts who have taken the brave step of moving into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, leadership in large organizations.
We hope this mini-series is a space of learning, encouragement, and ultimately community and connection. If you're new to DEI and or the world of Catalyst, we hope you'll enjoy.
We're so excited today and really honored to have Blair Taylor with us. Thanks for joining us, Blair.
You're more than welcome, Shannon. Good to be here. Good to be here, Justin.
Thank you.
Blair leads right now Accenture's North America Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity practice with more than 25 years of experience across the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Blair's career and passion revolve around finding innovative and scalable ways to help organizations develop their own people and the communities with which they are a part of. Prior to joining Accenture, Blair was a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, where he served as the lead partner for the U.S. Diversity and Inclusion practice. Before that, he was the chief executive officer of My Brother's Keeper Alliance, and we'll put a video to the link to an incredible video in the show notes. It was a nonprofit launched by then President Obama. And in his role there, Blair led one of the nation's most dynamic and ambitious BIPOC initiatives, engaging leading corporations, nonprofits, elected officials to advance low-income communities and populations. Before that, Blair was a member of the Starbucks Coffee Company leadership team, where he led the company's corporate social responsibility strategy, community affairs, and government affair functions, while also serving as the EVP of Starbucks Global Human Resources and the president of Starbucks Foundation. Blair, do you ever sleep?
Every now and then.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's been so great to learn more about you as we've prepared for this conversation. We want to start off with the first question being, how do you as a DEIB leader relate to the concept of being a catalyst? And even just kind of double clicking on that idea around your work, and from what I have seen, centering on this idea of moving from theory into practice. How do we actualize a lot of this work? As we talk to leaders, sometimes the question becomes, how do I move from the books and the theory into practices and best practices? Are there even best practices available? And so as you think about yourself as a leader and perhaps as a catalyst, we're curious how you relate to those.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. Listen, I think it does start with vision. I mean, we have to be honest, right? Like the vision is what gets people excited. It's what unlocks the possibility for involvement from high quality and talented people. So it does start with the vision, and whether that's a vision that's put on paper, whether that's a vision that's articulated in some other way. And I think the point you're raising though is, how do you get from that to the actualization of this, which is a huge step. And I will tell you, there are many who are great at the vision part and less so at the actualization. And I think, the biggest thing for me in recognizing that is the whole notion of building a great team of people, right? Like the collaborators matter in a catalyst kind of situation, and we've got incredibly talented people, and this gets back to the whole notion of building a diverse team, right? Because diversity is what amplifies different perspectives, what allows you to bring in points of view that are going to move things forward with a totally different in a totally different manner and with a totally different degree of success than you will if you have a monolithic group. This is why it's so important, and why I consistently look to build very diverse teams of people, bringing not just different backgrounds, but different points of view, different experiences, and then really ensuring that you have in that team those who are focused on, putting the building blocks together, right? So if you're the visionary catalyst, you gotta have somebody or somebodies who are really good at taking that vision and figuring out how to create an executional plan and strategy and helping you to go after pulling that together. And to be honest with you, there have been times where, I've put together some catalytic idea, and I've brought in consulting teams or somebody else to help me think about how do I bring this to life, within this particular organization or within this complicated community, right? And that often requires what I call the collective IQ, which is, the collective IQ is always smarter than the smartest person in the room, right?
Mhm.
And so how do you tap into that as a catalytic leader to move things forward? So I think, if you're a visionary and you're not necessarily the greatest executor, that's not necessarily a showstopper. You got to figure out how to build that team of collaborators to help you move things forward.
That's spot on. And what we talk about with catalyst leaders, and I often need like a couple people on my team, like a VP of operations and a chief of staff, doesn't mean that you're not the like get stuff done person. It means that you're very intentional about knowing what your skills and strengths are and building that team around you to execute it. It also, I think, doesn't mean that you're not a catalyst. It just means that you want to bring people who are going to help amplify the work. We can't do it by ourselves alone anyway, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the big picture thinking is hard to come by too. I mean, the true visionary who can get people excited about something that is a breakthrough, that's not easy to come by. That's a hard person to find. So you don't want to say that skill and that ability, which is invaluable, can't be linked to the operating side to make that
Right.
vision come to life.
It's such a great transition. I mean, so the podcast focuses on skills. And so I'm wondering, like, what are one or two essential skills that have made you successful in all of the incredible impact that you've had? And maybe sharing some stories about, like, how did you learn that skill was important? Maybe there's times where you realized it because you failed and you're like, if I had only done that thing, I would have been even more successful.
Yeah, well, I think number one is being optimistic and honestly believing that we face a lot of problems in this world, and particularly in our country right now, but the problems are actually solvable. Like if you start from there, that you don't let yourself get so bogged down in the negative energy and the world is coming to an end and there's nothing I can do about it. Right. So the optimism piece is critical. And I don't mean Pollyannish and, just believing that everything is wonderful, but I mean really saying, hey, what's that problem? Let's pick it apart. Let's figure out a team of people who want to go after it and let's try to solve it. And not necessarily even on the periphery, right? I mean, there's some big issues that we're grappling with. I mean, them, homelessness and inequity and racial injustices and poverty and educational crises and issues around infrastructure, and I mean on and on and on. I mean, but you know what? If you just come at it and say these things are we can actually figure out solutions to this stuff. Okay. And by the way, people have solved more complex problems than those in the past. All right. So there's automatically something that triggers, that opens up the doors in the realm of possibility. Get a bunch of like-minded people in a room to solve a problem. And I honestly believe every problem we face can be solved. So that's the first thing. Second thing is what we just talked about, which is collaboration. I do not try to solve things by myself. I mean, I may come up with a big picture and a vision, but I immediately go to bringing a great group of people together and trying to solve things. The third thing is, I I have learned over the course of my career. Somebody asked me recently, what's the most important skill that you have or that you've developed? And you can think about interpersonal skills. You can think about all of the things that you've learned, knowledge, all of those things. It in my experience, it boils down to selling. And I don't mean that, sometimes selling is seen as a 4-letter word, but I mean it in the context of being able to convince others of your ideas, being able to articulate in a meaningful way, so that others, and in an intelligible way, so that others can grasp the concepts, and being able to be comfortable on your feet in front of audiences. Those are, if I had to distill, like, if you can't do that, it's very hard to bring people along with you. I'm not saying it's impossible. I've just found it's very hard. And so, and then the last thing I'd say is, we talked about being, action oriented, and really thinking about how to move things from where they are conceptually to bringing them to life, right? Good ideas are actually out there, and they're kind of a dime a dozen. I mean, I'm just going to be blunt. They really are. I mean, there are tons of good ideas. The ability to take an idea and bring it to fruition, as we said, with building the right team and the right strategy and the right approach and understanding the market conditions, that is a different kind of thing. And understanding the nuances too, right? Timing is everything. Right? Sometimes an idea is ahead of its time. Understanding where and how something would be accepted by a marketplace. Not underestimating your own success. I mean, I'll just tell you a quick story. I was an entrepreneur years ago, and I opened up a store, and we completely underestimated the success of the store. When we thought, like, we're going to have success, but we had no idea. When we opened the store, there were lines around the store, 2 or 3 deep, and
Wow.
and it was so successful that we didn't have enough people to sell the product to the customers who were coming in. And there was a woman, never forget this, who literally looked our salesperson in the face and said, "I will never come back in this store again. This was the worst experience I've ever had." So we didn't properly anticipate our own success for our great idea, the catalytic idea, opening up this store in this area that really needed it, as part of a urban development strategy, et cetera. And it failed because we got out of the gates wrong. We should have had soft grand openings. We should have done more market testing and understood how many people would show up when we opened the doors, right? So even something as basic as anticipating the success that you would, people sometimes underestimate success, and that can lead to failure, right? As curious as that may sound. So I think there's a lot of analytics that go into this, in terms of getting that idea from concept to launch. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, right? And as we said earlier, if you struggle with that, how do you surround yourself? I've got this principle: surround yourself with greatness, right? I tell my kids all the time, if you just surround yourself with great people who are going somewhere, guess what? You're going to go there with them, right? By inertia, by relative connection, whatever you want to call it, right? If you surround it, I teach classes periodically at business schools and the like, and I said, to a group of people, you're all leaders in this room. You're all leaders. I don't care what you're doing right now. Lead from where you are. You are a leader. See yourself as a leader. But if you're a leader and you ever look around and you realize you're surrounded by knuckleheads, you say knucklehead, 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 knucklehead. Guess what? Knucklehead, right? I mean, on the other hand, if you surround yourself with greatness, right? You say, great, fantastic, unbelievable thinker, right? Don't be intimidated by that. I mean,
that's right.
Don't ever be intimidated by surrounding yourself with people who have ambitions that are higher than yours, or IQs that are higher than yours. Like, bring that to the table, because it's going to elevate your game. So all of those are pieces, Shannon, that I found along the way have been incredibly helpful.
Amazing. Yeah. And you already answered part of the last question, which was like, how do you get ready for effectively anticipating that success that you're talking about? And you gave some great examples. The last one, I just have to say, my mom's gave me this advice, which was just go straight to the top. Like, I was interested in a methodology called appreciative inquiry, and they had worked in that dynamic. And I was like, who should I talk to? And they're like, well, David Cooperrider wrote the book. Reach out to him. The worst that can happen is he passes you to the number 2 person, and now you're working with the number 2 person in the field, which is what happened, right?
Right.
Justin, did you have a question?
Advice, by the way. That's great. That's absolutely 100% right. Like, And you find it when you're in the world of business and you're dealing with organizations. Go as high as you possibly can, straight to the CEO if possible, straight to the founder, straight to the person who came up with the idea. Quite often, not always, but quite often you'll find that they're willing to talk to you, right? If you come in, and that's back to those selling skills and really being
That's
able to
right.
articulate your own vision and why you need to have a conversation with them. But that is the way that I have met people, leading all the way up to the president of the United States, is to having that kind of audacity, I guess, in a way,
Chutzpah.
right?
Yeah.
To get through the gauntlet, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go
Yeah.
back to sorry, go ahead, Justin.
I just had a quick question, yeah, or follow up. I think one of the things I heard you talking about too in the story, well, I'll frame it this way. I think with a lot of maybe younger DEI leaders, there's a lot of pressure to not make mistakes, especially in their roles. Like there's not a lot of room for error, perhaps. But I heard you speaking about how sometimes you do things and you don't know that they're not going to work out the way you think they are. And then you learn, what you learned from the fact that it didn't work out. And so I think I just wanted to pull that piece out too for folks maybe who are feeling like in their roles, there's this kind of like, I got to do it right. I can't, there's no room to make mistakes. And so maybe I don't take a risk, or maybe I don't go forward with an initiative and maybe if you wanted to speak to that, the learning from experience part versus the perfectionism that sometimes comes through when having these roles when you feel like there's not a lot of room for error from the top down in the space.
Yeah. So let me just say this: perfectionism is paralyzing. It absolutely, perfectionism is paralyzing. Like if your standard is perfectionism on every single thing that you do, you will be paralyzed from really breaking glass and having breakthroughs in your life. Failure is part of the journey. And you'll hear great leaders all the time talk to you about how much more they learned failing than they did when they were successful. And
That's
it's
right.
so true. It's hard lessons, right? But it's so true. I have an expression that I've used with teams of mine over the years, that failure in and of itself is not failure. Repeated failure is failure, right? So if you keep failing at the same thing over and over and over, that at some point it's like, yeah, this is kind of failure, right? But to fail, learn the lessons, adjust, make the course corrections, and go at it, and get to the next level. Not maybe not the pinnacle of success. Yeah, I'll just look at diversity, equity, inclusion for just 1 second, right? We've been at this work as a nation for 40 years. We are so far from perfect. Like if I said the standard was perfection, I can pick out one company, not one.
Right.
I mean, I work with companies every single week, not one that has achieved perfection. So if that's our standard, we might as well pack it in and go home, right? Because we're making, for the most part, making progress, iterative steps, maybe not fast enough. People can critique that. I know I do. But it's an iterative journey, right? And you can always set the North Star of that's our aspiration.
Yeah.
But perfection can be paralyzing if that, and I agree with you. Too many people feel like I can't step out of my comfort zone because I'm so afraid that if I fail, it will be the end of my journey. Take risks, right? Take smart risks. Take risks that have a large reward with less of I lose everything. Don't go to Las Vegas and bet it all on number 7. Okay, that's not what we're saying here. Don't run across the freeway at rush hour and see if you can make it. Okay, those aren't smart risks. But take risks in your career. Take risks in your job and your vocation. Think outside of the box about solutioning and problem solving. And as I said, surround yourself with other people who have the same kind of aspirations and intentions to solve the problem, not just incrementally address it. And you'll find, yes, there'll be times when you don't succeed, but that thing will keep moving forward to a point where you will have some breakthroughs.
I think it's such an important point, and I want to build on what Justin said and connect something you had said earlier. We're kind of in this backlash moment, like we saw what just happened with Target, right? And if you talk about, because we have catalysts who are in all sorts of different roles, UX leaders, CMOs, innovation people. If people, like, let's take innovation. If people take a test, smart calculated risk and innovation, and they fail, the impact is probably small. You might get less budget, less team, you've lost some credibility, but no one's going to say we never need innovation again. And it certainly isn't activating people's identity, personal identity across the organization. And so I'm wondering if you have, because I see that's part of the challenge with the DEI leaders is like the intentionality with, if you make a wrong step, you've really triggered something that's deep in people. And maybe you've actually helped or not, accelerated some of the backlash. And so I'm just wondering if you have any specifics about places that you think DEI leaders should be taking risks, or how you've navigated those difficult conversations before.
Yeah, so this is a subject where there's a lot of fear and consternation, right? Because it can be a very charged subject, particularly when you get into matters of race, right? So it's really important that you understand history, you understand what the facts of the matter are, and you take the pulse of, for example, your people and the populations that you want to be a part of, right? Or you want to help support. And so, this is where empathy matters, right? The E word matters. And I think that's one of the big things that's missing in corporate America today. And it's not, if you decide to go charging into ID&E and espousing theories that you have that are untested or have not been, you haven't communicated with others about, and you're liable to get yourself in trouble. I mean, it is, and it's a topic where, people have been doing this work for 20, 25 years, and they have really good insights and good opinions on what works and what doesn't. And if you want to bypass them and throw your theory of change into the mix, I just know you're doing that at your own risk. Okay. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, I could go over to Russia today and espouse theories on, the war in the Ukraine, and I'd be laughed out of the room. It's just not.
Or put in jail.
Or put in jail, right? I mean, there are consequences for talking about things that you just don't have any knowledge or understanding. So steep yourself in knowledge, seek out an opportunity to really understand what's going on. And I've seen CEOs who've done this. I've been up and close and personal to CEOs who said, you know what? I don't know anything about this subject. I don't even know where to start. Okay. I grew up in an all-white community. My neighbors are all white. My country club's almost all white. My kids go to an all-white school. An issue of race, I want to understand it. What do I do? Right. And that's where you direct them to, hey, go and talk to the leaders of your employee resource groups, sit down and have real in-depth conversations. What are some of the issues that they're dealing with in your organization? What are some of the issues that they deal with outside of your organization? Just life issues that maybe you didn't understand. When I tell people that, as a Black man who spent 25 years in Los Angeles, I was pulled over once a month by LAPD. And I was at one point, I was a business school student. I was a business executive. I was pulled over once a month and harassed. I mean, I'm not talking like I just got pulled over. I got pulled over, like, get out of the car, blah, blah. And the point with that is people were incredulous. They're like, really? And have you ever been pulled? I've never been pulled over by the police, certainly not that frequency. But that's getting into the world and understanding, like, why people form attitudes, right, about the world and the experiences that they've had feed into that. And if you haven't taken the time to understand the journey that people have been on, then, and you want to opine about, police and the Black community without understanding what some of those issues are, you're going to get the old expression, you're going to get your leg blown off in that conversation, right? And so just take the time to understand and realize you may never become an expert. It takes a long time to become an expert, but at least go through the journey of empathy so you have stories. We are a storytelling culture, right? In the US in particular. And when you spend time with people and you hear about their journeys, you not only start to gain empathy, but you gain the ability to tell stories. And that's what becomes convincing to others to follow you. Okay. And I think that's part of what we've been missing, candidly, in our journey to move forward on diversity, equity, inclusion, is storytelling majority population. I'm not talking about, I got plenty of stories, okay, but storytelling from the majority population in an empathetic way.
I love that so much. It connects with a conversation you were having with Karen Taylor, I think it was, the Chief Diversity Officer from Workday. And she was talking about how she had done the personal work. She's like, part of it is to do the personal work so that you can stand in a place to have those courageous conversations, the uncomfortable conversations, but you've done the like, and it is a burden on the catalyst, frankly, to do the own work. But I love the call to action. You're like, the CEO came very vulnerably, and you're like, and you have to do the work. I'll put you into all the resources, but you have to do the work.
Got to do the work. And by the way, the work is hard.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, if you've seen some of those conversations, this approach of mine is, one of the things I say to executives all the time is if you're 35, 40 years old and you've never been the only one in the room on any occasion, then you have no idea what, as a Black executive or, a Latino executive, that you go through every single day. Like, you don't know what that feels like, right? So go out and find opportunities to make yourself the only one in the room, so you can understand what that feels like, right? And I think that's part of what Karen was talking about as well.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move us on. I can ask you a million questions, but I'm going to move. What's the biggest challenge for you as a Catalyst leader in the work that you're doing today?
I think it's the pendulum. Especially with the D&I, the pendulum swings, right? And it swings one way, and we saw that with George Floyd, and the sort of uptick in the interests around addressing issues of race and inequity in the country, and then it swings back the other way. And the important thing, I think, for those who are in work like diversity and inclusion is recognizing that's the history. Like, that pendulum swing is actually the history of the country, right? It goes this way and then it goes back this way. And so, as opposed to letting that depress you, letting that feel like it's the end of the world and it means the work needs to stop or it's a complete failure, just recognizing that pattern is actually helpful. My wife and I, for many, many years, did marriage counseling and pre-marriage counseling, actually. And one of the things we would tell couples is the thing you want to avoid in your marriage is surprises. So let us tell you some of the things that will happen in your first year of your marriage, right? So that you're not surprised.
That's right.
You're going to have financial discussions. You're going to have communication issues. Here's what those look like, right? And what was amazing was the number of people who came back to us and said, you know what? You saved my marriage. Because if you hadn't told us those things, we wouldn't have anticipated them, and we would have thought we were a complete failure. But you told us.
You normalized it. It wasn't their personal failure. You normalized it. Totally.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And it's the same thing with this pendulum, right? If we can normalize it to the extent that it can be normalized, but normalize it at least in an anticipatory way, right?
Right.
Okay, that's what happens. We go this way and then we go that way. We go this way and then we go that way. Hopefully we're not swinging back farther than we swung forward, but we recognize that pattern and we anticipate it. I think that, it's always troubling, but I've kind of started to acclimate myself to it, but I'm not sure everybody has. And so I think it can be highly disruptive to the work, right? When that thing swings back and forth. And I think we're in one of those periods right now.
Yeah. And I think it's similar to a conversation I had with a mentor of mine. We're talking about the economy, right? So if you've never lived through a recession, then a boom, and there was like a lot of people in their 30s came into the job market right after 2008, and this is their first kind of dip, and so you're not used to that. And I think in a similar way, you named a little while ago that this work, we've been like a fully representative democracy for like 50 years, in comparison to the 400 years of this experiment. And so you've spoken in other contexts about the muscle strength and how that pendulum swinging is kind of like us building the muscle that we need to kind of continue this work to even get to the point where maybe we have the other side of time of 400 years or whatever of this type of experience for folks. So as you kind of navigate these pendulum swings, how do you sustain yourself from an emotional standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, from relational connection standpoint? How do you kind of find a way through the difficult times for yourself?
Yeah, I'm not going to kid you. Okay, I'm a praying man, and I rely a lot on my prayer and faith to get me through difficult times, whether they're work related, whether they're vision execution related, whether they're personal issues or crises. So that's number one. I lean a lot on God, and my relationship there has gotten me through many challenging times. Let me put it that way. Secondly, I remember years ago, my father, who passed away a few years back, he used to say, if in your whole lifetime, if you have 5 or 6 people that you can really call friends, you're really fortunate and blessed. And I remember when he first told me that, I didn't quite understand it, because I thought I had a lot of friends and, a lot of people in my life, et cetera. I've come to realize exactly what he was talking about, right? Which is a group of people, whatever the number might be, it usually in 30, okay? It may be more than 4, but it's not 30. A group of people in your life who are there with you when things are going well, and when things aren't going well. And I often say to people, when you're in a time of serious crisis, whatever that might be, financial, health, job, you name it, personal, mental health, and you look around, the people who are standing next to you are the only friends you ever had, right? And so I have learned to lean on that group of people, who it's a small but mighty group of people, including my family, my direct family, and a few others. And that also helps to get me through. And then the third thing that I think is back to this sense of optimism. If a lot of the studies have shown that optimistic people live longer, are healthier, et cetera. But I've just found that I can't carry negative energy. I can't do it. And part of the reason why I jettison negative